Batman has had his fair share of bad costume designs over the years, but today I'm taking it to the next level. How bad is it? You tell me. Hello super friends, and welcome back to another episode of Superhero Saturday, where we talk about the arts of superheroes, storytelling, and so much more. My name is Annie, and a while back I had this crazy idea to do my own terrible redesign of a classic costume, that costume being Superman. And while it was kind of a ridiculous thing to do, it was actually really fun to stretch my creative muscles on that. So today we're doing it all over again, but this time with the Dark Knight. Batman is one of the most popular characters in superhero fiction all over the world. And because of that, many creators over the years have taken on the task of creating a story to go with this particular character. And unfortunately, that means there have been a lot of hits and a lot of misses with this costume. Many fans still cringe and laugh at the Bat Nipples adaptation from the Tim Burton movies in the 1990s. And who can forget some of the extreme costume designs of the comic books of the 80s and 90s? Or dare I even mention it, the incomprehensible rainbow suits. If you want to get a little glimpse back at some of the best and worst costume designs for Batman throughout his history as a character, you can check out my History of Superhero Costumes videos. For my terrible redesigns that I'm doing today, however, I want to take a very specific angle, because I'm not just going to spray paint a bunch of garish colors all over his cell shading and call it a day. No, I want to do this purposefully terribly. I want these to be well-intentioned but ill-conceived designs, kind of like what I imagine the costume designers might have been thinking when they did the Bat Nipple costumes. Although I can't speak for them, and honestly I kinda don't want to. I want to create 3 different costume designs that have a solid foundation but have a less than attractive and maybe less than authentic execution. Something that could have been a good idea with maybe a different follow-through or even just a better story idea. And not just a bad design for bad design's sake. With that in mind, let's get into the digital studio and give Batman a well-intentioned but ill-conceived make-under. The first step in starting this design process was, of course, creating a foundation that I can build off of. Something that looks like what I imagine in my mind whenever I think of a basic Batman costume. The first idea that I had that was a really solid, again, but ill-conceived idea for making a Bat costume that was a bad idea was to invert his colors. Batman has always had pretty much a basic neutral in the gray zone costume, but with a little bit of blue and a little bit of yellow. So I had the idea of taking that yellow, making it the worst possible University of Oregon style yellow I could get, and putting that as the primary color for his whole costume design. But why would he have a radioactive yellow for his whole costume? Well, maybe it's because he's dealing with some kind of radioactive villain. So this design ended up being called Radio-Bat-ive, because I can't help myself. And I went ahead and took the whole thing and made it a lot heavier, a lot weightier, something that would be more like a hazmat suit than maybe a superhero costume. I gave Batman a full face mask to protect him from whatever might be in the air or radiating from across the room. His suit also zips up in the front, more like a hazmat suit, so he would have easier access in and out. I also gave him white boots and white gloves, which is different than a hazmat suit, but brings out kind of the highlights of his costume in a different side of neutral than we usually see. And I also gave him a smartwatch just because I could and I wanted to see it, so that it would glow and show maybe perhaps like a Geiger counter app to tell him whether or not he's actually safe to stay and fight crime in an area that may or may not have some level of radioactivity in it. And then of course, to make it over the top in the wrong direction, I also gave him an oxygen tank on the back, because if you're sealed up inside a suit, you can't risk contamination by breathing air that has possibly been radiated. So we put a whole giant tank on the back. As a scuba diver, I have practiced in carrying these around, and I know that wearing a cape with one of these is not the easiest thing in the world. So a lot of interesting elements could be a cool story design idea, but I honestly can't see bats running around with this type of costume. It wouldn't be Dark Knight at all. The next design, I believe, has some kind of story out there because there's a lot of play with Batman's character as him being the world's greatest detective. This is a kind of a common element for him being like not just the rich orphan kid with a weird bat fetish, but also someone who has trained and honed his physical and mental abilities to become the world's greatest detective. And who else is one of the world's greatest detective? Well, Sherlock Holmes. So this is the world's greatest bat-detective design. Sorry, I know, I really can't help myself. Which is basically a mashup of what I think that the classic Sherlock Holmes look is and the bat costume. And what would be the worst combination of those two? Having the cape incorporated into the jacket and then just the regular tights underneath. I apologize to everyone out there. I promise he is wearing tights, but he does also have the underwear on the outside that is fairly typical of his costume. I actually did kind of have fun playing with the mask here, incorporated into his very unique style of hat that he usually wears, so that we could still get the bat kind of ears and the bat mask to conceal his identity, but kept with that Sherlock theme that everyone is so used to seeing. And then with a little extra, I want to say Victorian flair, I made the cape a little bit more wing-like with the flared tips or whatever you call it, which I feel like I should have added into the original designs because that's a lot more Batman than I remembered at first. And then the little extra ornate elements like the yellow tie and the fancy gloves and the shoes that are just way over the top and really shouldn't be going with those skin tight tights. It's a little bit of a train wreck, although I do think there's probably some kind of Batman is Sherlock Holmes kind of fan fiction or even just actual fiction out there that exists for this character. This is just my idea of what the worst version of that might be like. And I think it came out pretty good, by which I mean pretty bad. The last terrible design that I came up with is what I'm calling Track Bat, because I came across this pin on Pinterest when I was looking for drawing references of this like tracksuit that had these big wide stripes on it, and it looked ridiculous and awesome, and I was just like, you know what, let's try it on bats and see if we could get that angle. A lot of the villains that Batman ends up having to deal with are part of organized crime, whether that be mobsters or gangsters or just kind of like a clan of all the supervillains together. So I wanted to kind of pull the opposite vibe on that and give him a little bit of that history of that visual aesthetic of organized crime into his suit, because he's often called to work in that field, so to speak. We also gave him the dumb visor that just is sort of trying to operate as the bat ears, and some giant sunglasses to maybe help conceal that identity a little bit, and a big old chain necklace with a giant diamond encrusted, perhaps, bat symbol that is unnecessarily distorted from the classic bat symbol that we're used to. Very interesting, but probably very expensive shoes and a fanny pack. This kind of like completes the look of just what are we really doing here? Is this a hero or a villain? Especially with those brass knuckles that probably say bats over the knuckles. Although honestly, I do actually really approve of the use of fanny packs for superheroes, because hello, if you're gonna be rescuing people who might be potentially injured, you might want to have some first aid supplies on hand. And since Batman often has his utility belt, a kind of weird interpretation of that might be to just go ahead and add in the fanny pack and just shove all of the parts into one compartment. This is definitely more along the lines of a less than authentic interpretation for sure. But honestly, I feel like I dig it as a look. Like I could totally see maybe borderline moral neighborhood vigilante wearing this look and feeling pretty fly like Batman. Who knows? And we have a little cat meow, cat meow, cat meow. I am the Catman. He just totally makes the white balance go crazy on this camera. Is that how white and fluffy you are? He's gonna get fur all over the place. He's such a cute little cow. He's such a cute little cow. Okay, we're going. And there you have it. Those are my 3 terrible redesigns of the classic Batman costume. How do you guys think I did? Were these actually terrible designs, or are they just kind of weird? Do you have a favorite one of these? Do you think any of these could actually work in a good story? Or do you have an idea of a different character that you'd like to see me try a terrible redesign? Or maybe you have a terrible redesign of your own. Go ahead and pop those down in the comments below and we'll continue the conversation there. And thanks again for watching, Super Friends. If you enjoyed this video, video, go ahead and give us a big thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more superheroic content in the future. If you want to check out my own superhero designs, which hopefully are a little bit better than this, you can go over to our website at www.fearless9.com and check them out for yourself. Thanks again for watching, Super Friends, and we'll see you next time.